institution effectiveness and efficiency to deliver on development outcome. But precisely, I think what I believe it can enhance the quality, for example, of the study is to, and I think it is missing here, is to discuss about what is the outcome of the policy you are targeting. For example, if we say the imposed policy and the participatory policy, what are the outcomes we are looking for, so that we can, at the end of our demonstration, we can say this policy achieved better this agreed outcome and the others not. And the other things which I'm thinking about is your assumptions, because I think in the community, even at individual level, the policy choice, I don't think it is mutually exclusive in addressing a particular issues. So an economic agent, or a parent can have combine one or two kind of policy to achieve one development outcome. So in assuming that you can only choose one among the key possibilities, I think we are kind of making some bias already in terms of effectiveness, or allowing people to make combined choice to better achieve the outcome. And I'm glad that in your presentation at the beginning, you mentioned about the limitation, the specificity of the context, but also, based on experience, the participatory approach, or the kind of so-called democratic process, is not necessarily kind of the most effective. I'll give an example. In Côte d'Ivoire, we advocated for a better school governance. At that time, there is this top-down policy at the school level, and we noticed, for example, the high level of corruption, and all sort of corruption, and weak effectiveness in school outcome. And the advocacy was that at the school level, we set up a kind of a committee called Comité de Gestion des Écoles, made up with all stakeholders, students, parents, professors. But at the end, the top-down policy and this so-called participatory finally produce or generate the kind of same result about the inefficiency and ineffectiveness of the governance of the school. So there is certainly other factors or variables we should consider in this kind of evaluation, so to better approach the reality we want to understand and address the challenges. Thank you.
Yeah. I think I would like to answer these two questions first. All right, so I will try to answer your question, but I think also embed some of his concerns. So I apologize because with time limitations, I didn't have time to elaborate into many aspects of the study. So to come back to the mutual exclusion of policies and related comments. So this is a framework. Suppose that you have a school, and in the school you decide whether you want to build a gym or to build a restaurant, right? And so what you're saying here is that the school needs to decide one of these two options in this setup. Now, it could be that in one case, the headmaster comes and imposes that it's going to be the restaurant. But in the other case, it could be that parent-teacher associations, together with the teachers, come together and decide what is best for the school, right? So that's what we're trying to evaluate. Given that in one case we end up still building a restaurant, the impacts might be different simply because in one case it was imposed and in the other case it was a collective decision. Now in the mathematical setup, we need to make some assumptions. So even though in reality we are saying that the individual is putting the maximum effort in, that the individual believes only in one outcome, in reality it could just be that the individual prefer one more than the other one, right? So you can always rank, so what we basically are meaning here, we can always rank these policies. So you as an individual prefer one with respect to the others. That's the only assumption that makes quantitative difference, right? But for simplicity, we're going to say, well, if you prefer restaurant versus gym, then we are going to say, well, you're going to put maximum effort into making sure that the restaurant give you better output compared to the gym. So we are not really saying that those two things, but it's basically giving a setup that allows to the mathematical derivation. And also to come back to his question back there. So the main difference here between the traditional random impact evaluation and this one is that here we are randomizing the institutions rather than randomizing the policy, right? So we are randomizing dictatorship versus democracy in choosing a project rather than randomizing the project, right? That's the basic difference. And we want to see, and so there will be a total effect. There will be an effect of the project and the effect of the institutions, right? Because in the case where it is imposed, you have an outcome. In the case where it is collectively decided, you also have an outcome. But what has been done traditionally, we just compare these two outcomes. So what we want to do is, within a certain context, to disentangle the pure effects of the policy versus the pure effects of the project itself, right? So that's basically the main difference.
Hello. Joseph Kamara. I guess my question is, are you measuring the treatment choices or the treatment impact of both of the two? And if you are measuring the impact of both the treatment choices, how do you ensure that a particular treatment choice, for instance, reading of textbooks, that participants actually read those textbooks rather than just saying that yes, I choose to read a textbook?
All right, so what we are doing is we are assuming a menu of treatment, right? A menu of quality. So we are not modeling, we are not measuring the treatment, we are imposing, we are basically setting up the possibilities that you can choose from. But then you are measuring the impact of whatever the choice you make on a specific outcome, right? So whether you choose one specific policy and the other one, that's what we're trying to measure. Now you are raising a very interesting topic, which is about the effectiveness of a treatment versus, say, the efficacy of the treatment, right? So we are not getting into that. So what we are doing is basically to compare what the outcome that you'll get if you chose, say, building a restaurant versus building a gym, right? And that's basically what you're doing.
Let's give a round of applause to Professor Peter. Thank you, Professor, for the work. And we will be inviting very quickly Professor Yan for the second presentation, from institutions to culture, experimental evidence. So we will welcome warmly Professor Yan. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you everybody. So I am a professor here at INSAE, and I will, and I'll be presenting this with this joint work with my co-author, Robert Oxby, from the the University of Calgary. And so we're going to be continuing on with this same question that Pierre addressed. Like, how do we identify the intrinsic effect of an institution? But we're going to do so using a very different methodology. We're going to use laboratory experiments to estimate this effect. And so, what do I mean by, first I'll define what I mean by culture. And so we're looking for a direct causal link between the institutions and culture. And so we define culture as a persistent and shared beliefs and values that help a group overcome the free rider problem in pursuit of socially valuable activities. And so this is basically contributions to a public good. And so this paper was motivated by two very persistent empirical regularities. The first is that countries with more democratic institutions have higher levels of civic capital, so more willingness to contribute to public goods. And the second is that regions within a country that have higher levels of civic capital have better functioning governments. So in this second one, each region is subject to identical institutions, but the institutions function better when the participants have, or when the people have higher levels of civic capital. And so as Pierre described, the causality can run both ways in both of these statements. So it could be that democratic institutions have a causal effect on culture by selecting different policies that the people prefer, and then the people are more willing to contribute to these policies. Or it could work in the opposite direction, where people who have a greater willingness to contribute to public goods demand to be governed by democratic institutions. And in the same kind of multi-directional causality works with the second statement as well. Individuals who have or populations that have higher levels of cooperation may be more willing to only accept better functioning institutions. And so in this paper, we're going to test, or we're going to identify the causal effect that runs from institutions to cooperation. And in particular, we want to identify this pure intrinsic effect of the institution, kind of independent of any policy choices or any information conveyed in the outcome of the institution. And to do so, we're going to use laboratory experiments in which participants engage in public good experiments in which we vary the institution that determines the type of public good. So in one setting, we'll have the public good being determined by democratic institutions, and in the second, we'll have the public good being directly imposed on the participants by the experimenters. So it's the same kind of comparison between democratic institutions and dictatorships. And then we also test whether the functioning of these institutions matter. Does the functioning of a democratic institution, the ability for it to implement policies that are voted on by the participants, have a direct effect on the outcome? So people's willingness to contribute to these public goods. So a quick preview of the findings is that we find that democratic institutions have significantly increased contributions to the public goods. But this effect is only realized when the institution works properly and it chooses where the institution chooses correctly the policy that the voters desire. Okay. So this has been done in previous literature, And I think this previous literature kind of highlights the pure intrinsic value of institutions. So Dalbo and his co-authors, they run experiments where individuals vote on whether to play a prisoner's dilemma game or a coordination game. And when the participants vote, he finds that there's a large increase in people's willingness to cooperate relative to when they don't choose the game, relative to when the experimenter chooses the game. In similar public good settings, Sutter allows individuals to vote on whether they can enforce contributions to the public good using punishments. So if somebody doesn't contribute to the public good, you can use your own money to punish that individual, or you can vote for rewards. So you can give your fellow participants a prize for contributing to the public goods. And so both of these studies find greater cooperation when the institution is chosen democratically. But the main criticism which we try to overcome in this paper is that they're unable to control for information that's conveyed in the institution itself. So for example, if you observe that 50% of the population votes for rewards rather than punishments, that information may convey to you some information about the future behavior of your participants, and it may directly affect your behavior. That similar effect can be found in Dalbo, because if you observe people voting for coordination games, this might signal to you that your participants are, or you're playing with participants who are more likely to contribute. And so the way we overcome this issue is by having participants vote on the most trivial policy that we could think of, and then observing whether contributions change. So what we're trying to do is completely eliminate any information. So I'll go into the first experiment that we run here, which will give you an idea of how we do that. So laboratory participants are put into groups of 4 and asked to make a contribution to a group project. And so they're given 10 tokens. So this is the payoff that individual I receives after the game is played. So they're given 10 tokens. They're asked to make a contribution C, the maximum which is 10. And then the contributions from all of the participants are added up, and then you get your payoff in the end. So it's optimal for all, or socially optimal for all participants to make the maximum contribution and receive the highest possible payoff. And so how we implement institutions in this setting is we ask participants to vote for the value of the multiplier on the public good. And so we ask them to vote for a multiplier of 0.3 or 0.4. And so regardless of your intentions in this game, you always prefer the higher value of the public goods. So you always want 0.4 whether you intend to free ride on the contributions of others and make no contribution yourself. In that case, you get a higher payoff. Or if you intend to cooperate and allocate your entire endowment to the public good, then it's multiplied by a higher factor, and you receive a higher payoff in the end. So the main point is that this institution conveys no information about the agent's preferences. So if you observe, and so what we actually observe in the voting behavior is that all agents unanimously vote for the higher public good, which is what you would expect. So in all rounds of this experiment, individuals always vote for the MPCR of 0.4. So you cannot kind of extract any information or beliefs about your participants from the outcome of this vote. And then we compare the contributions to the public good to a control group where the experimenter chooses the public goods value of 0.4. And so here's the results from our first experiment, where the baseline is where the experimenter chooses the value of the public goods. What we see average contributions are 3.8 tokens out of a potential 10. And when participants are allowed to vote, that value increases or almost doubles to, or more than doubles to 7.1 tokens out of your possible 10 tokens, with the maximum value being 10 tokens. So here we attribute this this effect to a pure intrinsic value of the institutions. So we've eliminated the policy choice mechanism, and we've eliminated the information elements of the policy choice. And so next we want to see whether this result persists over time. So in this next experiment, we asked participants to vote at the beginning of the experiment for the value of the public good, and then we repeat the game for 10 rounds. So participants play 10 rounds of this public goods game. And so here we see the results. This blue line is the baseline, where the experimenter chose the value of the public good to be 0.4, and the red line is the voting. So in the blue line, we see a very familiar result in the public goods literature, which is contributions decline over time. So we see similar results to our first experiment in round 1, and then by round 10, we're close to zero contributions. And had we continued this for more than 10 rounds, likely would we see contributions fall to 0. But in the voting treatment, we see high and persistent contributions to the public good. So we see no evidence of the traditional result of a decay in contributions. And keep in mind, this was just a trivial vote at the beginning of 10 rounds of play. Okay. So next we want to address the issue of how the functioning of an institution affects culture or individuals' willingness to contribute to public goods. So in this, to do so, we allow the democratic institution to fail. So with some probability, the outcome of the vote is not observed, and the participants are forced to play the public goods game with a value of the public good that they did not choose democratically. Okay, so how we do that is the experimenter in the treatment group, the experimenter collects all of the votes and then implements the outcome of the vote with the probability of the number of votes divided by 6. And so keep in mind there are 4 participants, and in all voting outcomes, individuals voted unanimously for the higher value of the public good. So basically, in the voting treatment now, we observe a high contribution or a high value of the public goods with a probability of 2/3. And so here we can see the results of this. And so in our baseline, this is where the experimenter chose 0.3. So participants did not vote, but the experimenter just implemented 0.3 value of the public goods. And here we see very similar results to when individuals voted, but the democratic institution failed, and they did not receive the policy that they voted on. And so the value of voting was completely nullified, and if anything, there's kind of a negative effect of having individuals vote and then not observing or not implementing the policy in which participants voted on. And then when the institution does hold, we see a similar result to what we saw in the one-shot game, where in the baseline we have average contributions of 4.2. So this was where the experimenter chose the value of the public good, and then when participants vote and the vote is observed, we see very similar contributions to when the vote was implemented with certainty. So these results kind of suggest that causality can run directly from the functioning of those institutions to to individuals' willingness to contribute to these public goods. Okay, and so I will conclude with this result, and
let's go for some questions very quickly. Yes.
Framework is like the control group and the frequency group will end up with the same marginal propensity. So I would like to know if we didn't have the same propensity for both, we can still apply the same procedure, have the same results.
Yes. Somebody else have a question?
In settings like this, experimental settings, I often wonder, how do you actually address the issue of meaningful sample size and expected or minimum expected change or effect? Are these any key parameters in your analysis?
Yes, yeah, so thanks. I didn't understand how the choice of multipliers, 0.3 versus 0.4, is able to separate the behavior, the 14 contribution behavior. If you could basically explain a little bit on that. Yeah.
Okay, so to address that first question, the choice of identical multipliers is crucial to being able to identify this behavioral effect. So if we were comparing two different policies, we could attribute the difference in behavior to either the policy difference or the behavioral effect of the institution. And so we could vary and have people vote on a value of 0.2 and 0.3, and then in the control group have the multiplier be 0.3, and in that case we could then estimate the behavioral effect with a different policy choice. So it's definitely doable. I can't really say what the results would look like if we did look at different policies, but it's definitely possible. So with sample size, that was something we were worried about when we started this project. because it's a relatively trivial intervention. We asked the participants to vote for vote for a dominated policy, and it was a unanimous vote always. So we weren't expecting much of an effect, but as seen in kind of as seen in the initial increase in contributions, it's we got kind of lucky or not lucky, but finding the fact that this intervention, this trivial intervention, caused such a large increase in the contributions, it made it easier to identify this effect with a smaller sample size. So had we found a very marginal behavioral effect of institutions, it would have been very difficult given the sample size of a few hundred people to identify this effect. So given the effect of given the treatment was large, we were able to identify it. So to go to Pierre's question, so to address the intrinsic value, so what we wanted to do was separate the information, so take away any information in the value of the vote. So and how we did that was by getting a unanimous vote. So everybody votes for a high multiplier, and so there's no information being conveyed in there. So you can't infer that somebody's going to free ride based on the outcome of that vote, and you can't infer that somebody's going to contribute based on the value of the vote. And then at the same time, we want to control for the policy choice just through the implementation by the experimenter. And so what's left over, we call this behavioral effect. One suggestion that we've kind of got is to look into more of the mechanism. So is this voting, for example, could just be forcing people to go through the mental calculus of the experiment to say, oh, it is socially optimal for us to make this contribution, and then they make this contribution. So in a way, it just may make the choice to contribute more salient by asking them this trivial high-low question.
So we assume that this is the last question. Thank you, Professor Yan. With a round of applause. Then we will move to the next presentation. Deliberation and bureaucratic cohesion, experimental evidence from local governments in Benin. And we will have Professor Leonard Wantchekon and Mr. Andre Gegeun here. So can we welcome them?
Hello everyone. Hi. I'm Andre Gegeun, a research associate at the Institute for Empirical Research in Political Economy. And I'm going to present a randomized control trial study that we conduct at the Institute with the Professor Leonard Wantchekon and myself. Okay. I'm going briefly through the outline, motivation, impression, conceptual framework, proposing intervention, research questions, and then the methodology that we have used to conduct the intervention, the implementation, and then the variable and measurement. And also, I just want to mention that we are still working on the analysis. So I will just talk a little bit about the preliminary result that we have here. Okay. As you all know, during these three past decades, most African countries start adopting local government in an election way. And like you can you can see in the literature, Barton and Rob, some explain that this motivation comes through the more need for transparent and accountable in terms of governance at local level in African society. But unfortunately, everything has not been as the way the policy maker planned it to be. Like for instance, they experiment the institutional void, lack of local administrative capacity. For instance, in some countries, we can see that there is no rules clearly prepared to start local government. Or for instance, the rule is there, but it's not very appropriate, it's not suitable for the country and its realities. In the case of Benin in particular, we see that there is a case of curtailed delivery of service due to limited resources, actually financial resources, or sometimes in terms of human resources, because sometimes they just move people from what we call here prefecture to the local administration. And also in our curriculum at university, there is not a typical domain designed for local administration. So there will face a lack of employees that would be that would very undertake all the process to have a very effectiveness local governance. Also, there is no system of direct accountability. Actually, in the case of Benin, we just only have the Ministry of Decentralization which conduct some audits at the end of the year, at the end of each year, just to see whether the commune used correctly the fund transferred from the central government to them. But again, we just need to set up a group of external citizens, external population as a stakeholder, and they will participate in every level of decision making. Then they can just play the role of to monitor everything there, and then report to population through media, through radio, through newspaper, and local meeting. And in that way, it works. But here, what we wanted to do is that we want to reach the same goal without spending more time or more money to create a group of external stakeholders. Because we want to work with the bureaucratic themselves. So this has very interesting position to detect or to monitor political corruption is very interesting with bureaucracy, because they are those who are whether taking the decision or implementing the decision. So they are supposed to know everything in terms of the functioning of the local administration. Apart from that, this can also imply the reduction of the petty corruption, because in terms of petty corruption, they are the one corrupted, actually, because they will participate into, and then when they will participate into this experiment, that can enlighten their conscience in terms of this is our mission and this is how it affects our daily work, and also how we deliver services in this local administration. Also, it will affect the staff motivation, because there will be one who will try to investigate the case of corruption, or who will report the case of corruption or the case of misfunctioning of the local administration. So, in fact, we hypothesize that it will affect and increase the motivation of the local administration. And also, we wanted the Secretary General of the administration to be the local point, the focal point, the main point that who we will work with, because he's not a politician, he's an administrator, so he does need to be influenced by the elected, the mayor actually, or the council, the municipal council. So for us, those are the reasons why we think that using the bureaucratic will be better and cheaper for us to reach the same goal with the internal or the bureaucratic monitoring proposed by previous researchers. So here we hypothesis that having the local staff will increase the group cohesion, because they will sit together, think of their problem, identify them, and reflect on the solution to solve them. And actually they will be the one who will implement this solution. So if it doesn't work, then they will come back again and change it. So it is very interesting to work together, and literature already show how working together or doing something with someone else can create a cohesion within this group. Also, at the end of our intervention, we think that it will also improve the staff performance. And then we also hypothesize that with more transparency and improved channel of communication, we will decrease the leakage, the corruption practices, and also the misallocation. That's what we hypothesized before we start our research. Okay, what is the intervention? Actually, it is a randomized experiment. So we want to evaluate the effectiveness of monitoring by bureaucratic actors on these bureaucratic actors' behavior. So we proposed a monthly semi-public deliberative forums to debate the state of the local governance held by the SG in an open dialogue basis. So it will be every month they will have one meeting. The participants to those meetings are local administration staff members, the local civil society and NGO representative, and the representative of social services, so the concentrated one, like the police representative, gendarme, health, education, infrastructure representative in those communities who participate to the meeting. So the question that we, through this experiment, the question that we want to answer are this one. Is bureaucratic monitoring effective? This is the first one, and the most important for us. Then we have, will increase transparency and monitoring of local government activity by bureaucratic agents and staff of the municipal government improve efficiency by reducing waste capture and corruption by elected elites? And then, can this intervention increase the capacity of the administrative, like performance, cohesion? And what is the impact of the intervention on the extent of lower level corruption by administration, local administration staff? Okay. To do so, the first step was the sampling. We start by sampling 20 communes in Benin. For those who know Benin, we only have 8 departments, and in each department we have the same number of control and same number of treated communes. So as you can see, we have 2 control and 2 treatment treated in Atakora and in Kufo. In all the other, we have only 1 control and 1 treated commune. After the sampling, we have some workshop. We have at least 2 or 3 workshops with the Secretary General here at IREP to prepare this intervention, this implementation, because there will be the one who will conduct the meeting. So it is important to them to know what are the research consists in, and also what will be their role, what role they will play when we will start. So during this meeting, they were very excited to participate, and also they think, like us, that it will impact the work that they are doing in the community. So, for step 2, we conduct two baseline surveys. The first one was on staff members. So we select randomly 30 staff members in each commune. So we have 600 of individual staff members, and then 2,000 citizens, 100 by commune. I forgot, but this one ensure us a MDS of 70 something hundred. So we are far above with the needed size of sample to make sure that we have a good impact assess. Step 3, we start the implementation, and just here we only have 3 meetings. The first one, we work with the Secretary General on the municipal audit report by the ministry, the one that I talked about earlier. And this typical result, they already have it disseminated and took some decision based on the result of the audit. So what we do during this first session is just to take the advantage to make kind of what are we doing so far? What have been done so far when we take some kind of decision based on the audit result. And then during our session, they see that some of them see that everything is going well. Some say that see that they were late in terms of the agenda that they set themselves. After this first session, the second session took place in October, and then we present, we as participant, but passive participant, because we don't have to give any opinion to bias or to influence how they will behave during the meeting. So we present the staff members' survey results. This presentation took into account all of the commune. And then they see how they themselves appreciate the work they are doing every day, discuss about it, and also how they appreciate themselves, how they evaluate their own performance. And during the third session, we present the citizen survey results. This one is the survey that we conduct in the commune with the household, and this presentation have been done by commune. This means that in each commune we only present the results of the population of that commune. And we were supposed to have some pictures there.
That's okay.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, then we also developed a meeting measurement tool. It is a form that will help us to see whether the protocol of the meeting have been really executed and respected by all of the participants, because we have so many groups, 10 groups, so they can just throw away our protocol and do whatever they want. So with this format, with this tool, we measure every aspect of the meeting, like number of participants, how many time they spend in talking about the problem, the issue, how many time they spend in developing the solutions or discussing the way they will implement the solution that they are stating, and then also how we use this tool to measure how to what extent they deviate from what we already said. And then at the end of the 3 sessions of meeting, we have 600 of staff members, another group of randomized selected, and we conduct the inland survey. And Also, we collect some other data on any ongoing projects or activity likely to affect our outcomes, and also data on finances, local finances, fiscal flows, local elected official, the mayor, the municipal, like the political group, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, researcher Andre. Let's remind that researcher Andre is a top researcher at IREC and a co-product for African School of Economics. Please let me give him a round of applause once again. So we will take some questions very quickly, and not more than.
Likely is the presence of the secretary to affect the decisions or the solutions, or let's say the outcome of the decision, the outcome of the reunions or the meetings.
My question is concerning the Secretary General, because while presenting you say that he's apolitical. I want to understand, is it because he's not elected, he's nominated, like you say, he's apolitical?
Congratulations, Andre, for your presentation. While coming to your sample size, why particularly in Atakora department you chose 2 treatment group and 2 control group, and the other one you just chose one? Thank you.
My name is Azizu Shamid. So thank you, Andre, for your presentation. I really like it. But I need some clarification. The first one is about what you have called political corruption. I need to know what is the local level, what you consider as corruption, political corruption. So the second thing is about the bureaucrats. So my suggestion is, since you are writing the papers and going paper, I just want to advise you to make difference between those who are in what Lipsky call street level bureaucrats. So they face corruption. They policemen, tax, those who collect tax, and so forth and so on. These kind of bureaucrats are different from those who deliver public service, maybe in a kind of closed office where they cannot have opportunity to face corruption day. When you make that difference, you may probably find anyhow some more interesting. Thank you very much.
That was a wonderful presentation. My name is Riaz from Kemba. Now, as a follow-up to what my colleague stated on the issue of corruption, I want to find out in your scheme of things whether you took into consideration the appointment of these bureaucrats. Because mostly corruption emerged from some of these appointments. How does the patron-client kind of relationship play out? Did you take into consideration the appointment of bureaucrats in your scheme of things?
I think it's linked to the last one. Actually, the Secretary General we say that it is a non-political position because the Secretary General is an administrator. He's not elected, and he's the chief of the local staff, all of the local staff. And even though the mayor can play a role to change him, it's not that easy. Because the Secretary General is working for the central government. It's not directly, but he's supposed to work for the central government. So he is a public official, so it's not possible for the mayor to influence his behavior. That's why we think that having him as the boss of the meeting will be very interesting for us because we are conducting a research.
Parliamentary elections. Thank you to welcome him to
Good morning to everybody. My name is William Asante, and as the MC rightly stated, I'm a student from Kemba, and I'll be presenting on the determinants of witness decision Ghana in 2016. Thank you. All right. I believe we are all for elections, and then we consider elections to be an important aspect of our democracy. And so everything on elections should be taken seriously. Now, this is the outline with which this presentation will travel. As you can see, people queue just to elect leaders to run the affairs of various countries. That goes to suggest that elections are very important to democratic states, and of which Ghana is a key player. All right. Elections are crucial, as I stated, and then there are various factors that have been, proposed by scholars as contributing to voters' decisions.
Pas dans du point ici. Non, je dis l'idée, mais je dis placer dans cette équation-là. Je crois pas que ça vienne bien. J'ai juste à penser les fonctions utilitaires, les choses comme ça, non.
Car si on est dans la littérature, ils peuvent trouver et commencer à ajuster à ce qui se passe. Par exemple, je crois que Gaël Soubi tape une balle de direct. C'est ça, non?
The SIER's, the Summer Institute of Economic Research 2017 has had a very impressive and a very, very good start. I've been impressed by the quality of the presentations, the quality of the research that's been done. I think it is very top-rate, very rigorous, intellectually stimulating, and excellent research work that's been done within the SIER. So I think it's been an impressive start, and I am looking forward to it continuing. I think the panels this morning were great, were really, really great and superb. I think for me, my big takeaway is that we do have excellent researchers who are doing excellent work in Africa, who are producing excellent results. So all the topics that were debated, were discussed this morning, are topics which are of relevance to the development of Africa. So I was very impressed with the quality of the research, I was very impressed with the quality of the topic, and I think for me, I was really, a lot is being done within the African School of Economics, a lot is being done within Africa, and a lot of this research needs to be taken to policymakers so that they can be able to make a difference in the lives of ordinary people. But it's been a great beginning and a great start and a really great panel. Yes, I have gained a lot. I mean, apart from being impressed with the quality of the presenters, I have gained a very strong belief in an African institution, the African School of Economics. I think the idea and the concept behind it is an excellent idea and it's an excellent concept. But from the various papers and the various presentations that were made, I have gained a lot of knowledge on the depth of the research and their findings. Some of them are not orthodox, some of them are not what you'd expect, but because they're backed by data, I think we need to pay more attention to them. So I would love to see a lot of these findings not only being published, but also being disseminated widely across the continent, across to policymakers, to NGOs, to others, so that people can benefit from the research. But it's been excellent, it's been great so far.
I presented this morning a paper on randomized evaluation of institutions, and I'm also looking forward to do some training in structural econometrics and institutions next week. The SIER began in a very amazing way, you know, with very interesting papers from PhD students, from master students, and from researchers everywhere. I found the level to be extremely high and the nature of the questions to be very interesting, the quality of the work, the methodology. I'm very impressed about what I've seen this morning. So I'm looking forward to see a lot more in the next couple of days. This morning panels were very interesting, very diverse. There were people talking about the impact of labor, child labor, on school attendance, the impact of health insurance on labor supply. There were all this work about randomized evaluations, about impact evaluations, and so on. So I learned a lot, and I think it's very interesting the way that it started, and I'm looking forward to learn more. I've learned from the empirical work that people are doing. There was some work from Cameroon, some work from Benin, and there was some work from other countries, and so especially Ghana. And so I learned about the methodologies that some people were using. So I'm an econometrician, but one of the students actually used a methodology that I've never heard about. So that was something that I learned today. And I also learned about the context in which those studies are being, performed. For example, the study in Ghana looking at the perception about succession in universities, and the whole idea on how do we succeed, ensure the future of an institution. Those things were, topics that I found extremely interesting, and I learned a lot from them.